Hello, it's John Heaton. Been away a while. Good to be back. I've been in the UK and doing various stuff. And today I wanted to revisit Wings at the Speed of Sound, which is quite a big favourite of mine. This album from 1976. With the back cover, a lot of people complain about the plain cover, but it's actually quite clever, and they actually went to Leicester Square and put these giant letters up on the face of the cinema there in the middle of the night, I think. So they went to a lot of trouble. It looks as if it's just put together these days it would just put together on a computer, but I quite like the cover. It's minimalist, and so just before I get started on Speed of Sound, I just wanted to pay tribute to a couple of people who just passed away. Will Jennings, the lyricist who wrote a lot of great songs featuring in my collection, particularly wrote with Steve Winwood, While You See a Chance, Slow Down, Sundown, Valerie, Big Girls Walk Away, Higher Love, a lot of great stuff in the early 80s with Steve Winwood. And actually I was reading he actually co-wrote Tears in Heaven with Eric Clapton, which I didn't know. Also, I think he wrote the lyrics for a track which was in Titanic, the movie Titanic. So that was Will Jennings, rest in peace. And also this week, Herbie Flowers passed away, the great bass player. And his resume is very impressive. I mean, apart from coming up with the bass line for Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side, which is epic, he was on the Diamond Dogs album with Bowie and also featured on Space Odyssey, the first album, or the second. Played with David Essex. He played on War of the Worlds, Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. He played on Gone Troppo with George Harrison. He played on Give My Regards to Broad Street with McCartney. And I think I'm right in saying he played bass on the lead single No More Lonely Nights, and also Long and Winding Road. Those are the two tracks. Played on T-Rex's last album, played on Nielsen Smilsen. 4 tracks on that album he played bass, Driving Along, the Moonbeam song Coconut and Jump Into the Fire. And also played with Elton on Tumbleweed Connection, Madman Across the Water, Single Man, and with Ringo on Stop and Smell the Roses. So Herbie Flowers, a very familiar player on many of my albums in my collection, and rest in peace, Herbie. So that was my tribute to those two guys. Back to Speed of Sound. So got to number 1 in the US and number 2 in the UK. It was a very successful album, and it's the kind of album where if you go to a second-hand record shop, you're likely as not as to find a copy of it in there, because it did sell by the shed load, and presumably that's why there are so many copies out there. And in Hungary, for example, I can find Indian pressings of Speed of Sound, which are very common, because I think Hungary must have had some deal with India to produce slightly cheaper records than were coming out of the UK. It reached number 1 just before Wings embarked on their tour of America. In fact, it was planned to coincide, but I think Jimmy McCulloch broke a finger and they had to delay the tour. So it was actually number 1 in sort of March, April time, and then the tour kicked off. But they were lucky enough to have Silly Love Songs as a number 1 single literally during the tour. So it must have been very satisfying to perform that song while it was number 1 in the charts. I think McCartney has said that in interviews, that it was very exciting to play a number 1 song live. This album has been criticised for its band democracy, in that it allows other members of the band to sing lead vocals. Now, I think it's actually quite a charming aspect of this album. Others disagree. And in a couple of cases, Paul wrote the song that the other band member is singing. And so there's nothing wrong with the quality of the song material, with one exception, which I'll come to. But I actually like the fact that Joe English gets a turn to sing, and he sings well. And Denny Lane sings extremely well on his 2 songs. Jimmy McCulloch sings a creditable vocal on Wino Junko, and the weak link is probably Linda's contribution, which I'll come to. But the production on this album, I think, is probably the best out of any Wings album, any post-Beatles McCartney album. Very cohesive. Unlike, say, Venus and Mars, where you had a couple of different lineups recording that album, for example, Jeff Britton was playing drums on Letting Go and Medicine Jar and Love in Song, whereas Joe English took over for the rest of that album. And on London Town, McCartney's playing drums on a few of the tracks. So that doesn't lend to a sort of cohesiveness of the album as a whole, but on this one, it's the same lineup playing on all the tracks. And although they allegedly recorded this album in a hurry before they went on tour, it really doesn't sound like it. It sounds perfect, and maybe some of the credit should go to Peter Henderson, who helped engineer this album, who'd achieved tremendous results with Supertramp, getting a superb sound with them, and I think he deserves some of the credit, because it really is not just a cohesive album, but the production, the way the drums sound, the way the bass is clear in the mix. Unlike Venus and Mars, unlike London Town, and unlike Back to the A, I think that those albums all suffer a little bit from a little bit cluttered production. Although you know that London Town is a big favourite of mine, song-wise. But in terms of production, this album, I think it wins hands down. So let's go to the songs. And what a way to open the album. Let Him In didn't quite make number one in the UK. Number two, stalled at number two. I can't remember what was keeping it off the top spot. I think it might have been the Wurzels Combine Harvester. But anyway, I'll have to check that. In number one, it hit number one in the US on the Cashbox chart, but only number 3 on Billboard. But it's a very simple song. If you ever tried to play the song, there's only a few chords on the piano. So again, another example of a song, deceptively simple, but very clever, and lovely all-inclusive words about, inviting people into his house and, come in, have a drink. Very, very pleasant sentiment. The Note You Never Wrote is written by McCartney, but he generously gave it to Denny to sing because he thought he wanted Denny to have a more of a chance to shine as a singer, and it's more of an epic song, quite Pink Floyd-esque in its instrumentation, with the guitar solo from Jimmy McCulloch sounding a bit like Gilmour. And very well sung, very moody lyrics, very effective. I love this song, and I can't really imagine McCartney singing it, although it would be interesting to hear a demo version with perhaps a guide vocal from Paul, but that hasn't surfaced, because this archive album has been released in archive form, but the bonus material is actually a bit thin on the ground, and they only managed to cover 3 sides of vinyl. This vinyl of the archive edition, side 4 is just blank, and I'm sure there's more stuff out there, but so they could have done a better job. But that's fairly minor criticism, because it's a very nice package, and in particular, Beware My Love is a very interesting version, because it's got John Bonham on drums, no less, an early run through of that song. So back to the album, moving on to She's My Baby. I think this is a great song. And again, it's fantastic production, and yeah, it's sentimental, and it's about Linda, but who cares? I mean, maybe some people carp about the line about gravy down to the last drop, or keep mopping it up, she's my baby, but I think it's quite cute, and I like it. Beware My Love is next, and this song was very effective, played live on Wings of America, although they dropped the opening verse and just went straight into the I Must Be Wrong section. But very effective rocker. Play this one loud. This one works live extremely well and on the album. Probably the only example of a true rocker on the album, well, maybe alongside Time to Hide. So this album is a little bit lacking on the rocky side of it, but big deal. Side 1 closes with Jimmy McCulloch's song Wino Junko, and this is a bit sad because the words are about being addicted to in this case wine and Medicine Jar. In the previous album, addicted to drugs, and of course Jimmy was kind of addicted to both, and he would leave Wings couple of years after this, and then die in '79, unfortunately. And he was only in his sort of late 20s when he died. So Wanya Junko, nice song, nicely played by the band. Flip over to side 2 and we get the tremendous song Silly Love Songs, which, maybe some people take the mickey out of this song, but I think it's just perfect answer to the critics. What's wrong with that? I'd like to know, because here I go again. And great bass line, as people have said, great interplay vocally between Linda, Denny and Paul, showcasing the Wings' signature vocal sounds. And very catchy and a deserved chart topper, really is. I think it's wonderful. I don't like the Broad Street version, by the way, which he did later, McCartney in '84. Cook of the House, well, I suppose if he gave all the other band members a chance to sing, he's going to give his wife a chance. So he writes this kind of generic rock and roll sort of innocuous tune called Cook of the House, and some lyrics about all the ingredients that you'd find in Linda's kitchen, no matter where I serve my guests, they seem to like the kitchen best because I'm the cook of the house. It's quite harmless, but it's very lightweight. And anyway, I don't hate it. And I was quite amused to see that it featured on the '79 Wings set list, no less. So that was unusual and surprising for me. By the way, Hypnosis did the cover for this. And they also did the cover for Wings' Greatest, which is another album cover where you think it's nothing much, just a statuette with the snow behind them. But they flew all the way to the Alps to film the statuette with the real snow behind them. So it's not fake in any way. And this one, another example of the cover actually took a lot of painstaking work to put together. Although you just think it's a mock-up when you look at it these days. Back to the album, where were we? Time to Hide. This is more or less Denny Lane's tour de force, best song he's ever done with Wings, I would say, along with perhaps I Would Only Smile, which came out on the Red Rose Speedway archive edition, which I also love, and Deliver Your Children from London Town. But this is right up there, and this works extremely well live, with Paul playing superb bass on the Wings Over America album. But even on the studio album, where it's a bit more subdued in its sound, it's a very good groove that they've got. And very, very interesting words from Denny. Love it to bits, must do something about it. Well, this was a song written by McCartney, and he did do a demo with a guide vocal, which is featured on the archive edition. By the way, the archive back cover is slightly different. The pictures of the band can more clearly show you here is different from the original album. If you compare it, this is the archive, this is the original. So you can see all 5 of them, they've chosen different shots. So anyway, Must Do Something About It. I don't think McCartney could have sung it any better than the way Joe sings it. And it sounds as if he wrote it, but he didn't. McCartney wrote it for him. But it's this sort of probably made up lyrics about, all day long I've been alone and I must do something about it. Played another losing card game with myself, lonely book on the shelf, something like that, and very effective, very, very well played by the band. San Ferrian is a pun, I think, on the French phrase "ça ne fait rien," but it's not particularly clever either way, and it's not a particularly good song. I think it's probably the most lightweight song on the album outside of Cook of the House, and it's fairly harmless, but nothing much more than that. And Warm and Beautiful, again, divides the audience. I know people like Invisible Ray hate it. I absolutely love it. Good one to play on the piano. Elvis Costello, big favourite of his, I understand. And I'm sure Linda was appreciative of the song because it was written to her. And it's just very stately and very hymn-like. And actually Paul has come out and said it's one of his favourites. So yeah, I think great way to end the album. So I've heard various people not like this album. For instance, Larry Graves, when he rated all the McCartney post-Beatles albums, he had this one fairly low, which I was quite surprised. about. But anyway, it did well commercially. As I say, it's very cohesive. A couple of big hit singles, a couple of hidden gems in there, and just want to finish with the Karen Tyler review in the Beatles Illustrated Record, saying, further detailed retrospection indicates that the speed of sound thoroughly deserves its success. Perhaps the sheer power ingredient is missing, but the ability to rock, and rock hard, is only one of McCartney's many approaches to music. He genuinely feels no need to lean overlong on the heavy button when there remain so many interesting melodic themes to be explored. So melodically, this album is pretty strong, examples being Let Him In, Beware My Love, Silly Love Songs, and power-wise, it is somewhat limp. Altogether, it is a morning album. The ideal accompaniment to hard labour, or, God save us, housework, and irritatingly unilayered if played when evening shadows have fallen, when glow moths glimmer, and when the mood of the nocturnalist is one of purple despair mingled with deep introspection and a desultory randiness, or something like that. I just love that review, it's so witty. So yeah, this probably is a morning album, but none the worse for that. Thank you for watching. See you next time.